"Hello, Lark," he said, his voice low, rough around the edges but unmistakable. My hands froze mid-step, a tray full of coffee cups trembling. I stood rooted to the linoleum, heart hammering, unable to breathe. The diner lights flickered overhead, neon casting pale pink reflections across the cracked Formica tables. I barely recognized him, and yet every line in his face, every gray strand of hair, every set of familiar piercing eyes screamed the truth. My grandfather, Samuel Whitmore, was alive. 8 years. 8 years I had mourned him. 8 years believing the story my father, David Bennett, and stepmother, Eleanor Sharp, had carefully orchestrated. I had collapsed the night they told me he passed away. A stroke. It happened overnight. I remembered the room spinning, the nausea, the suffocating hug from Eleanor, while David murmured softly, "It's a blessing, honey. He's at peace." I had cried over a casket I never truly saw, over a death that wasn't real. Now he stood in front of me in the quiet, greasy haze of Sunset Junction Diner, leaning heavily on a worn cane, wearing a beige wool sweater frayed at the cuffs, the same eyes locking onto mine. My mind skipped, heart hammering, a strange calm mingled with disbelief. "It's really you," I whispered, my voice cracking. "But you're supposed to be dead." "I know," he said, a faint smile touching the corner of his mouth. "I never left, Lark, not really. But I had to let them believe it." My knees threatened to give way. The diner faded into silence, the buzz of the fridge, the sizzle from the fryer, even the laughter from the trio of truckers in booth 4, all drowned out by the weight of that moment. "But why?" I managed to choke out. "Why let them tell me you were dead? My father? My stepmother?" He shook his head, gray eyes clouded with sorrow. "Eleanor wanted the garage, the land, my savings. They built a life on lies. They erased me. They tried to erase you." His hand, gnarled and strong, rested briefly over mine, a tether to the past I thought was lost forever. I sank into the corner booth, staring at him, trying to reconcile memory with reality. The smell of burnt coffee, grease, and stale neon seemed to intensify the surrealism of it all. I believed them, I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. "I thought I was poor because I wasn't working hard enough, because I wasn't smart enough. It was all a lie." He gave a soft laugh, dry and hoarse, like gravel. "No, Lark, you were always meant to fight, to reclaim what was stolen from you. That's why I stayed hidden, to wait for you to be ready." I felt tears burn behind my eyes. My mind flashed to childhood days at Whitmore Auto in Maple Ridge, Kansas. I remembered the roar of impact wrenches, the scent of gasoline and motor oil, the Saturday mornings with rubbery eggs, crisp bacon, and salty pancakes, a secret ritual only he and I shared, memories of learning to read engines, to hold a flashlight steady, to listen before looking. Those days had been my sanctuary, now tainted by years of deceit. "Grandpa, how? How did you stay hidden all this time?" I asked, voice trembling. "I was careful," he said, "and I trusted you would find me when the time was right. But for now, Lark, you need to know. Everything they told you about my death, about your inheritance, about us. It's all false. They stole your life alongside mine." I swallowed hard, heart racing. Every instinct screamed at me to sit down, to absorb, to breathe. Instead, I leaned forward, gripping the edge of the table. "Grandpa, then what now? What do we do?" He looked at me, eyes steady, commanding despite age and weariness. "Tonight, we start. But first, tell me, where are you listening from? Who else is out there, hearing this story?" And in that moment, the diner, the neon glow, the quiet highway outside, it all faded. My grandfather was here, alive, and our fight to reclaim the truth, to expose the lies, was only just beginning. I couldn't shake the image of him in that diner booth. My grandfather, Samuel Whitmore, alive and staring at me with those sharp gray eyes. It felt unreal, like someone had ripped the floor out from under me. I needed proof. I needed evidence that could survive scrutiny, because if I went to the authorities without it, I'd be dismissed as a delusional granddaughter. Naomi Fields, my coworker and friend, became my first lifeline. She had an eye for detail, a legal mind even before finishing her paralegal certification. "Clara, we're going to treat this like a case file," she said quietly, her fingers flying over her laptop. No assumptions. Everything has to be documented. I nodded, heart racing, realizing for the first time that 8 years of grief, isolation, and lies could be dismantled with the right proof. We started with the obvious. No death certificate existed for Samuel. Not in Maple Ridge, not in the counties surrounding. The funeral home listed on the old invitation was long closed, replaced by a yoga studio. Naomi leaned back in disbelief. They faked everything, Clara. They built an entire story around your grandfather's death. My stomach churned. Every memory, every tear I had shed, had been manipulated. Next came the corporate records. Monroe Holdings, LLC, my father David Bennett, and Eleanor Sharp's shell company, had received the entire garage, farmland, and Samuel's savings for $1. Naomi's eyes went wide when she showed me the filings. They hid it in plain sight. It's audacious, she whispered. The boldness made my blood run cold. 8 years, gone in a single legal sleight of hand. I knew I couldn't handle this alone. I reached out to Ethan Cole, a lawyer renowned for fighting elder financial abuse. I met him in his small, sunlit office downtown, the air thick with coffee and the faint smell of old books. He listened, his jaw tight, eyes narrowing as I laid out every detail. Clara, he said finally, this isn't just a guardianship dispute. This is financial elder abuse, fraud, and forgery on an industrial scale. We have a case that could bring them down. We began building our arsenal. First, the original will from Samuel, prepared with a trusted attorney years ago, naming me as the sole heir to the bulk of his estate. Second, the forged revocation, dated and signed to appear legitimate, but clearly manipulated by someone using his power of attorney. Third, the bank statements showing wire transfers to offshore accounts, including a $2.5 million deposit to the Cayman Islands, executed shortly after Samuel's funeral. Every detail we uncovered was a nail in the coffin of my father and Eleanor's deception, but documents alone weren't enough. We needed witnesses. That's when I called Karina, the nurse who had secretly helped my grandfather stay in contact with me. She was hesitant at first, afraid of losing her job, but when I explained that her testimony could prove his isolation and manipulation, she agreed. Her voice trembled as she recounted the no-visitor orders, the phone privileges revoked, and the repeated lies told to Samuel to make him believe the world had forgotten him. Every piece of evidence added clarity, turning my rage into determination. Naomi meticulously cataloged every filing, every email, every ledger entry. Ethan planned the legal strategy like a battlefield map. We'll start with a temporary guardianship petition, he said. We freeze all assets. We present the independent medical evaluation proving Samuel is fully competent. Once that's set, the rest will follow. As I sat there, watching Samuel struggle to read through paperwork, leaning on his cane but eyes fierce and alert, I felt a shift inside me. This wasn't just about money. It was about reclaiming our family, our truth. I clenched my fists and looked at him. Grandpa, we're going to fix this. I promise. He smiled faintly, the first real warmth I'd seen in months. I knew you'd find me, Lark, he whispered. I knew you'd fight. And in that moment, I realized this was no longer a tale of grief. It was a battle for justice, for truth, and for the life that had been stolen from us both. Every document, every sworn statement, every testimony we collected was a step closer to exposing the lies that had defined my world for far too long. The night stretched on, lit only by desk lamps and laptop screens, as we prepared our case. My heart pounded with adrenaline, but also with a sense of purpose. 8 years of deceit had met their match. And for the first time since that shocking diner encounter, I believed we could win. The courthouse loomed over me like a gray monolith, the kind that made your chest tighten and your stomach knot. I parked and took a deep breath, trying to steady my racing heart. Beside me, Grandpa Samuel Whitmore shuffled slowly, cane in hand, but his eyes were sharp, alert, unyielding. Naomi adjusted her blazer, her expression all business, and Ethan Cole gave me a small nod. Stay calm, he said. We have everything we need. Inside, the courtroom smelled of polished wood, floor wax, and anxious energy. I could see my family already seated at the opposing table. David Bennett, my father, looked pale and strained, like a man who hadn't slept for weeks. Beside him, Eleanor Sharp, immaculate in her navy suit, radiated a cold, controlled fury. Brooke and Maddie, my stepsisters, scrolled on their phones with bored indifference, oblivious to the storm about to hit them. The bailiff called the room to order, and we stood. Grandpa's hand trembled slightly in mine. "It's okay, Lark," he whispered. "We're going to show them the truth." I swallowed hard, nodding, my stomach fluttering with a mix of fear and adrenaline. This was more than a hearing. It was the first step in reclaiming 8 years stolen from us. Their lawyer opened with a smooth, rehearsed pitch. "Your Honor," he said, voice syrupy, "my clients have been the loving caretakers of Mr. Whitmore for nearly a decade. Sadly, due to his advancing dementia, he has been disoriented, and we believe Ms. Bennett is exploiting him for financial gain." He placed a thin folder on the judge's desk. "We submit a psychiatric evaluation confirming Mr. Whitmore's confusion." My blood ran cold. I clenched my fists under the table. Ethan stood, calm and commanding. "Your Honor, that report is entirely fabricated. Mr. Whitmore has been evaluated by Dr. Alistair Yao, an independent board-certified geriatric neuropsychologist. His cognitive functions are unimpeachable. He is fully aware of his financial and legal decisions." He turned, placing a heavy folder in front of the judge. "We also present the original will, notarized and executed 10 years ago, proving Ms. Bennett is the sole heir. The revocation presented by Mr. Bennett and Ms. Sharp is a forgery. We have forensic handwriting verification, bank statements documenting illicit offshore transfers, and testimony from Nurse Karina, who witnessed Mr. Whitmore's isolation." The courtroom held its breath. I could see Eleanor's eyes flicker, her calculated calm cracking. My father shifted uncomfortably in his chair, glancing at the floor, pale and defeated. The judge, Elena Vasquez, middle-aged and imposing, scanned the documents, her face unreadable but attentive. I was called to the stand. My legs felt like jelly as I walked up. "State your name, please," the clerk asked. "Clara Bennett," I said, my voice steady despite the tremor in my chest. Sworn in, I began recounting the night I saw Grandpa alive, the diner, the special breakfast, and the nickname Lark. I spoke of the fake funeral, the forged documents, the $1 transfer, and the Cayman Islands account. Each word carved the truth into the courtroom air. Caleb guided me through, but I spoke mostly on my own. I described the 8 years of lies, the isolation, the constant mental manipulation. I looked at my father and stepmother, meeting their gaze. "For 8 years, I said, voice steady and clear. "They told me he was dead. They stole his life and mine. I worked myself to exhaustion while they built a fortune on my inheritance, and they called me greedy for asking questions." The judge's eyes remained fixed on me, absorbing every word. Caleb submitted exhibits one by one. Original will, revocation, bank statements, forensic report, Karina's sworn testimony, and APS findings from Mia Larkin. The evidence was overwhelming. David and Eleanor's lawyer stuttered, trying to interject, but Caleb cut through with precision, exposing every lie. By the end, the courtroom was silent. Grandpa Whitmore, with cane in hand, stood tall for the first time in 8 years. He told his story calmly, without anger, detailing his isolation and the deceit of those he had trusted most. I felt a surge of relief, of righteous anger, and anticipation. The first battle was almost ours. The judge would rule soon, and finally, justice for the stolen years, and the truth about Grandpa Whitmore was within reach. The courthouse felt even colder this morning, a sharp gray building looming over me as I stepped out of my car. Inside, the air smelled of polished wood, floor wax, and the faint metallic tang of tension. I could feel my stomach knot as I adjusted the sleeves of my thrifted blouse. Grandpa Samuel Whitmore walked slowly beside me, his cane clicking against the tile, but his eyes were steady, alert, and burning with a quiet intensity that gave me courage. We entered courtroom 2B. Reporters and photographers had gathered, whispers bouncing off the wood-paneled walls. Eleanor Sharp and David Bennett were already seated at the opposing table, their expressions masks of controlled panic. Their lawyer, an older man in a perfectly tailored suit, flipped through a thick binder with forced composure. Brooke and Maddie, my stepsisters, scrolled on their phones, their disinterest stark against the tension in the room. Ethan Cole began systematically presenting our evidence. First, he held up the original notarized will of Grandpa Whitmore, crisp and legitimate, each signature and seal verified by witnesses. My pulse pounded as he moved on to the forged revocation documents, showing the discrepancies in handwriting, the unnatural uniformity that screamed fabrication. I could feel Eleanor's grip on the table tighten, and David shifted uncomfortably in his chair. Next came the bank statements. Ethan projected them onto the large courtroom screen. Massive wire transfers, including a $2.5 million movement to an offshore account in the Cayman Islands, all executed shortly after the fake funeral. My stomach churned, reliving the moment I had first discovered them. Ethan's voice was calm but firm, guiding the court through each irregularity. This wasn't an accident. This was orchestrated, deliberate, and designed to mislead and defraud Mr. Whitmore's rightful heir. Karina, the nurse, took the stand. She described the years of isolation, the no-visitor orders, and revoked phone privileges. Her voice shook at times, but she held firm. He asked for contact with his granddaughter multiple times. Every request was blocked. He was completely cut off from the world, except for visits from Ms. Sharp, always accompanied by her attorney. I could see the disbelief creeping across the faces of the gallery, even among the reporters. Mia Larkin, our APS investigator, followed, presenting the official report documenting financial exploitation and coercive control. The silence in the room was deafening as she explained how Grandpa Whitmore had been manipulated, legally and emotionally, over 8 years. Every line she read made Eleanor's pale mask crack just slightly, and David's jaw tightened. Then Grandpa Whitmore walked to the stand. I felt my throat tighten as he took his seat. He told the story calmly, without accusation, without anger, just the unvarnished truth. He recounted being admitted to the care facility, the constant isolation, the lies about my life abroad, and how he had been misled into signing papers he was told were routine taxes or insurance updates. Every word was a hammer blow to the fabric of deception Eleanor and David had built. I couldn't help but watch their faces as he spoke. Eleanor's eyes flicked to the floor. David's hands twitched in his lap. The court hung on every word, sensing the weight of 8 years of deceit and betrayal. I felt a surge of vindication, but also a chill of adrenaline. This was real. This was happening. Ethan Cole summed it up, presenting each piece of evidence with precision. The original will, the forged revocation, bank statements, witness testimonies, and the APS findings. "Your Honor," he said, voice low and commanding, "the evidence is irrefutable. Mr. Whitmore is fully competent. The manipulation and theft are clear. Ms. Bennett, his granddaughter, is the rightful heir, and the estate must be restored." The judge leaned back, studying the documents and our witnesses. I could feel my chest tighten, a mix of fear and anticipation. The air in the courtroom seemed to hum with tension, the quiet ticking of the clock magnifying every heartbeat. Then, finally, the words came, crisp and commanding. "The original will is restored. Clara Bennett is the sole legal heir, and all stolen assets are to be returned." I exhaled, a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding for weeks. The relief was almost physical, a wave crashing over me. Eleanor and David sat frozen, their power evaporated under the weight of the truth. For the first time in 8 years, the scales of justice tipped in our favor, validating the hours, the evidence gathering, and the unwavering determination to uncover the truth. I looked at Grandpa Whitmore, and he gave me the faintest smile, proud but weary. 8 years of lies, manipulation, and stolen moments, finally undone. The room seemed to brighten, just slightly, as if acknowledging that justice had been served, not through fury or revenge, but through truth, persistence, and courage. The morning light spilled through the large windows of Second Sunrise Cafe, painting the hardwood floors in soft gold. I stood behind the counter, hands steady on the espresso machine, inhaling the rich scent of freshly ground coffee and cinnamon. It smelled nothing like the greasy fryers of Sunset Junction Diner, and for the first time in years, the work I did belonged entirely to me. I wasn't a waitress scraping by. I was Clara Bennett, manager and partial owner, carving out a life that had been stolen from me. Grandpa Samuel Whitmore arrived, leaning on his cane, but standing straighter than I'd ever seen him in 8 years. He smiled, a mischievous twinkle in his eyes. "Late for a shift, aren't we, boss?" he joked, the sound filling the warm cafe. I laughed, a sound I hadn't allowed myself in years. He settled into the corner booth by the window, the same spot I'd reserved for him, and sipped his coffee quietly, watching the world go by. The past 8 years of lies, deceit, and isolation still haunted me, but now they were shadows behind a life I had reclaimed. Using the funds from Grandpa's secret trust, along with the assets we recovered in court, I bought back Whitmore Auto. I didn't reopen the garage myself. Instead, I leased the land and contracts to a logistics company, ensuring a steady income for both Grandpa and me. Every payment reminded me that control had shifted back into our hands, that the years of manipulation, of believing my grandfather was gone, were finally ending. I set strict boundaries with my father and stepmother. They could no longer dictate access or speak on behalf of Grandpa. Any contact had to be on my terms. I felt an intoxicating freedom in that control, a sense of justice and personal sovereignty that made every stolen memory, every manipulated moment, burn with purpose rather than despair. I had taken back my life, my name, and my family's dignity. As the cafe filled with the quiet hum of morning customers, I realized this was more than financial recovery. It was emotional reclamation. Grandpa told stories to anyone who would listen, his laughter filling the air, the corners of the cafe warm with connection. He was no longer a prisoner of deceit or fear. He was simply Samuel Whitmore, alive, alert, and cherished. I glanced around, thinking of the Firefly Junction Diner, the place where it all began, the tray of coffee trembling in my hands as I realized the man in front of me hadn't been dead. I thought of the casket, the fake funeral, the forged papers, the offshore accounts, and the 8 years of stolen life. And then I smiled. They hadn't buried me. I had dug my own path out. I was holding the shovel. I was standing. I was free. The holiday season approached, and the cafe glowed with strings of lights and festive decor. I wanted to pause for a moment and share this with all of you who had followed my story. If you've listened from start to finish, I hope this Christmas finds you safe, warm, and surrounded by truth and love. Remember, even in the darkest moments, perseverance and clarity can restore everything that was taken. If this story moved you, please like and subscribe. There are countless other stories from courageous women, each sharing their journey through lies, hardship, and triumph. Hear them, learn from them, and celebrate their victories alongside them. I watched Grandpa lift his cup in a quiet salute, the morning sunlight catching the silver strands in his hair. I smiled back. "To freedom," I whispered. And in that moment, the cafe felt more than a workplace. It was a home, a sanctuary, and a testament to the life we had fought to reclaim. 8 years of shadows behind us, and now, for the first time, the future was entirely ours.